Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to Linked in the Endzone. This is episode 2, brought to you by Sideline Sports and an extension of the LinkedIn podcast with, well, myself, Lindy Endzone, as the title suggests. And this week is a pretty interesting week. We got the Dallas Cowboys game to go over, and the Eagles got a well-deserved rest during this bye, as we all know. But I'm joined here by a man that I haven't really had a collaboration with in about 2 years, so I'm very excited for this one. Please welcome from Gate City Sports Talk, man himself, Stephen Heitter. Steve, how you doing today, man?
Doing well, sir. I appreciate the introduction.
The pleasure is all mine, and you're an individual that I really appreciate the football mind of, because in the short time that I've gotten to know you, you've had in your life, you've had coaching experience, you've had football experience, and actually playing a couple of positions, most notably quarterback, if I remember, with us talking in the past. So I really appreciate the intellect that you bring to your channel in terms of your content. So it's almost who better that I know that I know through the YouTube community to bring you on and to discuss some things and what we've seen in the first really anticipated matchup between bitter NFC East division rivals.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was a game of emotions, and you could see that despite us finally getting that victory, and we've won 3 out of 4 now at Lincoln Financial versus the Cowboys, but they fought their off in that game. I mean, I'll give them credit, but boy, that was a comedic set of circumstances for the way they closed that game out. That the only person who could spoil a game any worse than the Eagles apparently is the Dallas Cowboys.
What did they say in the sports media all the time? What can go wrong will go will go wrong for the Cowboys, and
that was a crazy set of circumstances, man. I mean, from what was it? I think they had like a false start on Tyler Smith to they took a sack, which wasn't really their fault. I mean, the right tackle just got absolutely obliterated by Josh Sweat off the snap. I mean, Dak had no chance to respond to that. But then instead of clocking the ball, they run a play, and they're sitting there now with they have to reach the end zone because they're going to be out of time. So even if, in my opinion, even if CD gets that first down, I don't think they have enough time to honestly get another playoff. Like, I think it would have definitely been up against it, kind of pushing it, to be honest. So, I mean, I just thought it was just a comedic effect to, like, the Cowboys will Cowboys if you let them.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt. So let's start from let's start from a bit of a past tense perspective. So prior when we're going into this game, from your point of view, we got Dallas at home. We're a 3-point favorite, I believe. So really, the home team gets the 3 points. You can call it even if you want. So, like, what was your approach? What was your approach, in your opinion, as to what you were looking for and how the Eagles could come away with a win at the Link versus their top division rival?
I was more so focused on how offensively they would adapt to the way that Dallas attacked them with Micah Parsons. I knew they weren't just going to line Micah up on the line again and try to go after Lane Johnson. We saw after the first meeting that just did not work for them. The second meeting, Micah still really didn't have a huge impact on them when it was Gardner Minshew in there. However, there was some rumors and some rumblings that they were playing him a little bit more off ball this year as a pass rusher. So they weren't necessarily playing him as an overhang per se. They were definitely mixing up and matching his snaps a little bit. So I was wondering how the Eagles would attack that. Like, I was wondering if they wouldn't go maybe a little bit more heavier set with in terms of like trying to put him in conflict with RPOs or direct runs right at him. We've known that the Eagles have really backed down off the RPO game this season, to be honest. So it was definitely kind of one of those things where I was like, okay, I'm curious how they approach this. I'm curious how because you have to take it to Micah. Like, you can't react to Micah. You have to make Micah react to you, or it's going to be a really, really long afternoon.
Yeah, I somewhat thought the same. I think my approach was a little bit different for this game, and Well, in terms of the RPO approach, there's a couple of obvious differences, even spanning last year. And one of the other differences is because of the later events that have happened to our quarterback, and we'll get into that eventually. But I'm going into this game and I'm understanding that the Cowboys are a team that live a lot of their game off of committing turnovers and producing turnovers, getting their opponent in an uncomfortable position, forcing turnovers, whether it's by fumble or interception, just playing good defense overall, turnovers on downs, any way that they could potentially really, any way that they could potentially disrupt what the opposing team is doing. They feed off of that. And then once they start, they won't stop. They put you in a chokehold. Game's over. In a lot of cases, it's a blowout. So I'm thinking, okay, well, the Eagles have struggled with turnovers off and on, game in and game out. And this is really a game where they have to go to their strongest suit. And by that, I mean just creating a bunch of long, sustained drives to
Mhm.
keep the to keep the opposing quarterback off the field. And this has stemmed for as long as us going back and watching Super Bowl 52, how good of a job they did with that. One of their last scoring drives at the end of that game, what was it, a 10-play, 75-yard drive? They're keeping Tom Brady off the field. And that's a lot of what the Eagles' bread and butter is their ability to sustain drives, really take a lot of time off the clock. And they were able to do the same thing in this game as we go over some of the raw stats here that I have up on a quick overlay. And the teams are split by some Dallas Tears, like as you can see in the middle there. There's some Dallas Tears in the middle, but Hurts 17 to 23 for 207, 2 touchdowns, a QBR of 60 out of 100. He had the second highest passer rating for this week. Unfortunately, A.J. Brown's record streak came to an end for this game. 7 catches on 9 targets for 66 yards and a touchdown. The fractured forearm of Dallas Goedert. Prescott had a game of games, really, if you want to say that, but he was sacked 5 times. So I'm going over a lot of these raw stats here. And I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. The Eagles were involved in the game very similar to this already, and a lot didn't really recognize it. And I had to go back in the schedule. Wait a minute. The Eagles had a very similar game in week 2 against the Vikings. Kirk Cousins had a heck of a game. I think he had 10 fewer yards than Dak Prescott, throwing touchdowns all over the place. I think it's like 4 touchdowns to 3. Justin Jefferson goes for over 160 yards. He had a little fewer than CeeDee Lamb, but no touchdowns attached to it. But the difference was the Eagles committed, I think they created like 3 or 4 turnovers, but they only got 10
Yeah.
points off of it. So
Osborne and Addison too.
there's there's a lot of emptiness going on here that the Eagles were still able to power through. And it's yeah, the last stretch was nerve-wracking, but in a nutshell, we have already seen a game finish this way before, and we kind of just forgot about it.
Yeah, I think Dallas is. I'm not a Dallas content creator, but I'll give my input on their offensive structure. I think the problem with Dallas is when you look at them from a schematic standpoint, where's your distribution of your targets? Who's your 3 guys? On
Mhm.
the Eagles, we can explain that to you in a matter of seconds. Dallas requires a little bit further detail with that, doesn't it? So, I mean, they don't really have that. I don't know. I guess you want to call it holy trinity of target distribution, if you will. Like I would imagine if you looked at their spreadsheet and their target shares, it's probably a little bit more extensive than Philly's, to be quite honest. And that's just because outside of CeeDee Lamb, I mean, they're really high on that young man Ferguson, who he cooked a bad interior middle of our defense right now. That's
Mhm.
still trying to gel. It's without a nickel corner. They're doing a bunch of things that's causing us to get beat across the middle of the field. But I don't know that they have a very obvious and clean 3 guys that you can list. Like for us, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and I would even add a fourth wheel to it, which would honestly be the running back position. And talking about DeAndre Swift, because I do think that he impacts not only the running game but the passing game. He's kind of played into that a little bit. Although because of the way Dallas was playing us, we didn't have a lot of those opportunities in that game to get the ball down to the backs in the passing game. When you look at Dallas, is like structurally, like I said, I agree with what you're saying in terms of the total yards, the shape and feel of the game. I would say the Eagles did build a little bit bigger of a lead on Minnesota, and they fell into like a really heavy prevent there. But I will say that, like, at least with Minnesota, like, I mean, they have Osborne, they have Addison, and they had JJ. Now, of course, JJ's been detracted now. But yeah, I mean, definitely, like, that's one thing I worry about Dallas when I hear all this talk on Twitter and these guys thinking they're legit Super Bowl contenders. And it's like, yeah, but when you get into that slugfest, it's just Dak and CeeDee. That's what you're going with, man? Because I got to be honest with you, man. I think y'all are first to second round exits. I think that's what your roster says. I think you're going to have to heavily rely upon your defense to step up and do something not just great, but probably historic in the playoffs to even get past the divisional round. I'm not trying to throw shade at them. I'm just telling the truth of what the construction of the roster is.
Right. Yeah. I kind of felt, and I'm trying to figure out how I can word this here. I was drawing a massive blank there, but I think a lot of it goes into the critical points. And I wanted to go over a couple of these kind of one by one. And as the first point says, it was very similar between both games. The Eagles in both between the Vikings and the Cowboys game, a lot of the similarities and how they were able to score points. A lot of their damage did come. In the second half, and instead of against the Vikings, where both teams tied, I think at 21 apiece in the third and fourth quarter. The Eagles were able to win 14-6 in the second half. So, and then a second thing that ties into that is, 3 of the 4 Eagle scoring drives, they lasted longer than 6 minutes. One of them, was just 3.5 minutes. And I think that drive was the Devontae Smith touchdown, which was, oh my goodness, that throw was unbelievable. Because there's a lot more that goes into it and what Hurts has been able to do that a lot of people I don't think realize. And I think I'm one of the only people that kind of realizes this, other than you, Steve, probably. But, I think there's some people that don't truly understand what it means, like in terms of efficiency, how important it is to create scoring drives as long as the Eagles are able to, because you talked about the Cowboys offensive structure and what the Eagles have versus what the Cowboys don't, being able to attack you in 2 different ways. Other than the fact that if one portion of their game is just not working, they can still beat you with the other. So, in your opinion, in terms of talking about how the Eagles are able to sustain these drives as long as they are, in your opinion, what really makes them so good at doing it? Because this is a thing that we have seen almost on a year-to-year basis, and it's become a lot more noticeable with Jalen Hurts as the quarterback because of his skill set that kind of factors in, and it kind of doesn't. But in your opinion, what makes the Eagles so good at being able to sustain long drives like they do?
A lot of it has to do with the way they can manipulate the box, to be quite honest. And we're seeing a little bit of a detraction from that ability right now because, we're on our third right guard, who thankfully we spent a premium pick as that guy is the third right guard. And hopefully we will get our starting right guard back following this little break we're on currently. But, it starts right there with the detraction at right guard. And then you add into it that you have an injury to your quarterback. That's very, very a major part of the way that you can manipulate boxes and kick defenders out. Even if they try to get +1, if someone's playing the quarterback, you can basically make it helmet on helmet. And then on top of doing that, you got to look at the fact that you had like Dallas Goedert and Jack Stoll, who are both really, really good run blocking tight ends. These guys can kick you out and dig out of there. Then you add in what you can do on the outside, whether you're in 11 or 12 personnel. At the end of the day, you still have basically, AJ Brown on one side who just set, historic rate at the receiving position. And on the other side, you got probably one of the highest ceiling receivers in the NFL, still young guys still trying to realize that potential, but Devontae Smith. So it's not like you can just man up and forget about playing. You know what I mean? Like there's got to be some level of protection on the outsides there in case you get hit with an RPO, in case you get hit with a play action pass on top of, the head of your defense like that. So I think it's the totality of everything. But now that we're seeing, we're a little human now in the run game. You know what I mean? Like we are down the right guard. We do have an injured Jalen Hurts, and teams are not going to respect him pulling the ball down as much right now. We are down Dallas Goedert now with a fractured forearm. Like there's a little, little bit of a, I guess you could say a crack in the foundation here of what's going on, if you will. And we've seen our run game still be fairly decent, but not like it was. Like, I mean, the first 3-4 weeks of the season, like if we wanted it, we got it. Nobody was stopping us from doing what we wanted to do to you in terms of the run game. It was just like taking, candy from a baby at times. And I think that goes into your, like long sustaining drives.
Mm-hmm.
It's the way the Eagles are built. Get a double-digit lead on you and then play clock. And the way that we're able to play clock is that even if you score defensively, if we can make you drive the field, but not giving up any big play and run clock, even when you make that score, if we can then take the ball and clock the game on you, it's all over. Basically, I think there was one game, wasn't it Tampa Bay? I can't remember who it was. We went on like a 9-minute drive to end the fourth quarter. Could have scored. We could have run up the points. We didn't. Like that's I think the real underlying philosophy of the coaching staff and why they do some of the things they do. The problem is that when you play that type of prevent style defense, although like with Dallas, they got 3 possessions and they did essentially clock themselves out of the game by not being able to actually pretty much meet the expectation. Those 3 and outs hurt. When you can't sustain those drives anymore, now you got a problem. Now the way that you're fundamentally set up is a little bit of a problem because you're not necessarily taking time off the clock. You're not necessarily threatening the defense. And on top of that, you're playing a prevent style defense that's giving up anything within like a 15, 20-yard radius. You know what I mean? So, I mean, there's definitely some things a little amiss right now, if I'm being honest. But when things are running smoothly, this team is, I mean, we've seen it. I mean, they've lost, 3 games I can't remember how many games it is in total now, but I think we're like in the past 27, I think we've lost 2 games or something like that, regular season games. Like it's a historic rate, man. I mean, this team is just absolutely thumping people right now. And that's a big part of it. The way that we're able to manage and run clock, the way that we're able to execute both from the passing game and the run game, the fact that people can say that dual threat quarterbacks don't last in the league. Well, if you got a guy building offensive concepts and running your offense for 10 to 12 years, it's going to be a long 10 to 12 years. If they can execute this type of dual threat offense for this duration, at this ability level for a duration of time, if you will. And it sucks, man, because like I always felt like with Andy Reid, we were on the verge of this stuff, right? Andy was so creative, man. He was an offensive mind. A lot of the things we see running the NFL today are really, they're the babies of Andy Reid. Mm-hmm. However, we never really got that full dual threat duality to McNabb, partially because McNabb gave up on it and wanted to prove a point. I don't think we're going to have to worry about that with Jalen Hurts. I don't think Jalen Hurts gives a crap how he wins. I just think he wants to win, period. And I think that's just the truth behind it.
He really has a Jordan mentality behind him. And of course, coincidentally enough, he signed to Jordan Brad to begin with. And he's only 25 years old. He's only 25 years old and he's already doing what he's doing. But yeah, I mean, it makes perfect sense. And I think of it 2 ways. I think of it 2 ways for myself personally. I think in the means of an offense, there's 2 ways. Like there's 2 large defining ways that you can attack somebody. You can either go in a means of rapid fire and use all the talent and solely base it around speed, scoring as fast as possible. Or you can be slow and methodical, chew time off the clock, use both phases of your offense between the run and the pass. And I think what makes the Eagles so dangerous and how they've been able to consistently do this is that they can use both at the snap of a finger. It's just how healthy they are at a given time to be able to do that. And that's one thing that they've been struggling with for one. And we'll
Mhm.
get into a couple of things in a little bit here as well. That one of them being a massive improvement from the beginning of the year. So a couple other of the critical points that I came away with this game is that I know a lot of this may seem empty calorie to some people, and and seeing some of the things, seeing some of the tweets that you put out, I know where you're going to go with these too, Steve. But a lot of these fourth quarter statistics that came in, Dallas having 163 total yards in the fourth quarter, the Eagles only had 14. Dak had 151 of those with passing. Hurts only had 3 passing yards. First downs, they got obliterated 14-3. 5 of the Cowboys' 22 first downs came off of penalties by the Eagles. So, I mean, a lot of that, 10 penalties for 98 yards, 5 red zone trips for the Cowboys. And being that we talked about this meltdown backstage and a little bit in the beginning of the show, and me personally, if they lost that game, that would have been one of the worst meltdowns I've ever witnessed as an Eagles fan. In my opinion, that probably would have been one of the worst. The miscue on the one run where Swift bounces into AJ Brown and he immediately goes down. I think it was a 3rd and 7 play, and we'll get to the 3rd and 3 as well. But just that
AJ
just that
Brown made a mistake.
overall.
That was on AJ Brown.
Yeah,
He
I
made a
think
big
he
mistake.
was. I think he was. Wasn't it
He
because
was
he
on the
was
outside
over the
foot.
tight end instead of the
Yeah,
tackle?
he was on the
Okay.
outside foot of the tight end instead of being on the outside foot of Lane Johnson. So the
Yep.
depth of the play was wrong, which created the timing to be wrong, which created the collision. And because AJ Brown's like freaking swole Batman,
But he can
I
still
love
run it.
DeAndre Swift, but he folded like butter, bro.
Hmm. Yeah.
He was melting like butter on that play.
So I mean, it was too much ground for
Yeah,
him to cover. But
yeah.
but overall, when my takeaway from a lot of what didn't happen for Philly and what did happen for Dallas, and well, Dallas did what Dallas tends to do sometimes, and
Mhm.
sometimes a lot of people don't like Mike McCarthy's game management, especially in the fourth quarter. But I understand a lot of this seems empty calorie because the Cowboys lost. But
Mhm.
if you give up a lot of these things, if you give up a lot of these things to another powerhouse team, such as you do this against the San Francisco 49ers, you're guaranteed to lose. You're almost likely guaranteed to lose just because of just because of the structure and how they're built themselves, or in general, just a team that's a lot more careful and a lot more efficient with the football, especially in crunch time. I think a lot of these can produce a loss rather than the Eagles escaping with a win at home, because Dallas wasn't able to capitalize due to shooting themselves in the foot.
Yeah. I mean, Dallas's meltdown's a big part of it. I mean, it was quite enjoyable to see, but they had a legitimate shot at winning that football game, to be quite honest, on the road.
I mean, yeah, I mean the pass
It was
interference on
completely preventable.
Bradbury late, and it's like,
Yeah.
oh my
Yeah. I
goodness.
mean, it was completely
So,
preventable. All you needed was a couple of first downs and the game was over.
mhm,
Um, with that said, I mean, it's tough because like there were some like go back to the AJ Brown situation, right? AJ Brown is
yes,
not aligned where he's supposed to be aligned. They're running motion. They're doing this because they need to test this man coverage stuff. They're doing things, to basically to attack. But it's also no secret that we're 32nd or 31st in motioning this season. So like part of that's the fact that we just don't incorporate, we don't use it that much. So our players
mhm,
make these little small errors in judgment of where they're supposed to be. There's a lot of different ways to take these conversations, and when you really dive down deep into the putting these things underneath the microscope, if you will. With that said, I will say, like, at the end of the day, you just got to find a way to convert. You got to find a way to drive the
yeah,
clock. You got to find a way to put away an opponent, and that's what we're missing, is like that killer instinct to put an opponent away. Like, I don't care about winning the game by 1 point. I don't care about winning the game by 30 points. But I do care is that you take control of the fate of the game and not have the fate be determined by your opponent. Because to be fair, the fate of that game wasn't in our hands. It was in Dallas's. I mean, they had the ball at the 6-yard line and they completely folded. I mean, that was completely them. They folded in the situation. They folded in the moment. You give San Francisco the ball at the 6-yard line, they're probably running. Like, it's going to be a dogfight in the trenches for 6 yards, and there's 4 downs. That would be a dogfight on those 4 downs because our D line is really good at stopping the run. Their offensive line is really good at opening it. It's like that would be a dogfight at the 6-yard line. Dallas just really doesn't have the ability to punch it in like that. Like they've definitely, like, I saw a lot of Cowboy fans were tweeting out, and it was something like I halfway agreed with. Like, you can't, like, come on, man, you can't re-legislate a game. Like, you don't know if they would have won, but I certainly understand the sentiment that if they still had Ezekiel Elliott, they win that game because they could run it at the 6. They could run until they put it through, on those 4 downs. I don't know if that's true. I mean, Zeke has lost a step or two. Like, our D-line is still pretty good. We still get through and we shut down the run game pretty well. With that said, like, I can definitely see how that would, like, now you got to account for, trying to single up and move CeeDee Lamb and us working against your guys in coverage. Like, I think Turpin on the Josh Sweat sack, I think Turpin ended up getting matched up somehow on Zach Cunningham, which is like,
and he was wide open, I think. Yeah.
I don't know if I couldn't see it. Like, I got to go back and watch the 22 a little closer. I was more so watching a lot of our offensive snaps so far. I haven't really watched this on defense like that, but the initial thing that I saw, I didn't see him being wide open, but someone said he broke open on the back end of the pylon. And I was like, oh, like I didn't watch the play run through long enough for that. Because I'm really watching us from an offensive perspective right now more than the defense. I did all defense last week. That's why, like, just thematically for the YouTube channel, you know what I mean? Like, I got to throw some offensive videos or people are going to be like, yo, what are you, like a defensive channel now?
I mean, you can arguably say between both Philly and Dallas that you're talking about the run game. They almost have a similar issue to where for the Eagles, it's DeAndre Swift. And then when Kenny Gainwell is consistent enough, he contributes. And then for Dallas, it's Tony Pollard and then
Rico Dowdley, something like that. Yeah.
Whoever behind them, whether it's the same issue or just not getting enough carries, they're both in similar situations here that they just don't have they don't have a definitive power back to really create some space for themselves when the gap isn't sufficient enough for someone that's a little more shifty.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting because I think both of the offensive lines have been a little underwhelming on the 2023 season. The difference is when Philly's been healthy, there is a track record of positive production, especially in the run game. Dallas, I just don't think they've had it on the season entirely, to be quite honest.
Swift had 175 yards in that Vikings game.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Yeah, like we've definitely had our moments. Like we had a 9-minute drive in the Tampa Bay game that was, it was facilitated through some passing game. But make no mistake about it, Tampa Bay trying to say like, Jesus, do not let them run down our throats here was a big part of it.
I did look that up too. 15 plays, 69-yard drive, 9 minutes and 22 seconds.
Yeah, that's nuts.
That is
insane.
My goodness.
Like they could have scored at any point on that drive, but they were like, nope, we're going to take your soul away. We want you to watch the zeros tick.
Slow, painful death. Painful death. That's what that was. But
and that's what people were asking me about the situation with Cam Jurgens and then, what I thought about Steen. And I said, look, I think Steen is going to be that guy eventually. I liked what I saw. Like, he got beat. And I pointed out he got beat in pass protection. I thought PFF is absolutely nuts that they think that. I cannot believe they graded him the lowest guard in the NFL in week 9 in pass protection. I'm like, bro, the dude from the Jets got beat like a freaking drum. What are we doing here? Like, dude gave up 8 pressures and 2 sacks against the Chargers. Come on, bro. Stop playing with us like that, man.
He got like a 13.2. I think it was like a 13.2 Tyler Steen's coverage or his pass block grade was. His run game grade was higher than that. I think he was in the 60s in terms of the run. Okay, there you go. You're back now. You further.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, 16. Yeah, sorry, man. That's that 5G, bro. It giveth and it taketh away from you.
Yep. I do appreciate that Tyler.
He was the 16th highest graded run blocker. And I thought
Mhm.
I thought they were crazy in their pass protection. I thought they were way over the top in their run grades. Like the dude did not play well in space. I'm not going to lie. He did not do well working to the second level, and he did not work well in space on gap. Like I thought they were way too high in his run grade and way too freaking low in his pass protection.
He
Like,
he got he got fed to the wolves, I think, in his very first start as a rookie, and you have Micah Parsons on the other side of that defensive line, and you already know Dan Quinn is going to come to you and exploit that weakness in your O line, and he's gonna do whatever he wants with Micah, where wherever your weak point is, that's what he was going to do. And I mean, yeah, but when in doubt, I trust Stout. You know, we have no reason to disagree with this man. Whoever he puts out there on game day to start, there's a reason they're out there. I mean, he's arguably the best offensive line coach in all of football for a reason. What he's been able to do
yeah,
with Jordan Mailata and Cam Jerkins playing at that guard spot, and everyone's thinking, okay, wait a minute, he's gonna replace Jason Kelsey, and he looks really good at right guard. And it's like, okay, we're at a point in the season where, well, we don't want him to move now because he's too darn
yeah.
good there. But
Beef
yeah,
Jerky can
no,
play, man. Beef Jerky's a player. I was shocked on that one. I'm not gonna lie, Lindy. Like that shocked the crap out of me. I knew he was going to be okay in that role. I think when he's been healthy, he's been
mhm,
as good, if not even slightly better than Isaac Sayamalu as a right guard. And like Isaac was a really freaking good right guard, to be honest.
yeah,
Now, I had some issues when he was younger at left guard. I mean, there was a few times I remember back in that 2019 season when we played Seattle and he got lifted in the air in protection. I think it was
mhm.
Puna Ford. It was someone like that lifted him, physically lifted on. I'm like, bro, Puna Ford is like 5'11". What's happening? Like, but I mean, yeah, like I
Nine
mean that was crazy to me.
2019.
Yeah,
That means Dillard would have been. I think Dillard was left tackle at that point too. So
it was
that
a
that
rook.
side would
Yeah,
that side was already a weak side to begin with.
yeah. No, remember that was the game that Dillard moved to the right.
That's right. That's right.
Dillard was
But
playing right tackle that
the
game. You don't
Seattle
remember?
game, yeah, the
It's like right
Seattle
with
game
your left hand.
specifically. Yep. The Seattle
Yeah,
game specifically, he had to move to
yeah,
right because of the Lane Johnson
yeah,
injury, and that's when Seattle was bashing us. Oh, they were very predictable, blah blah blah. Yeah, no. that
yeah.
that's done, that's done and over with. That's been done. But yeah, I mean, I don't, it's like I'm not trying to sit here and feel bad for Tyler Steen or nothing, because he was obviously ready enough. Aside from the injury
Mhm.
issues, he was
They
obviously
put him
ready
in
enough
there.
to start.
Yeah,
They put him in there. Even the previous game, I think it was against Washington, when he came in for, what was it, 6 snaps, and then he had a couple of pass block
yeah.
reps, and then he had some against the run. He put
Mm-hmm.
some really good tape out there, and
It did. Yeah, he
I,
did.
I think I
Yeah,
think that's what you want to look
frustrated the
forward
crap
to
out of Duran Payne.
first.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to
Mm-hmm.
look forward to that first. You want to see some positivity first, because it makes it a lot. I think it makes it a lot easier to correct the negatives, because you already built a basis on, having some good reps. And I think a little bit of that happened in the Dallas game, because you're going up against just as competent of a defensive line, but Dallas has Micah Parsons. Washington does not. So, I
It's
mean,
true.
it just made it a
Yeah.
little bit worse for him, but he still played great. And he still played great,
Washington has
all
a
things
really,
considered.
really good interior defensive line. They're
Hmm.
very talented on the interior D line. But yeah, I agree that. Well, I mean, like, look, Montez Sweat and those dudes were decent, but they're not as impact a pass rusher as what we were seeing, with Micah Parsons. Like Micah
Yeah.
and those dudes are fast. Sam Williams is really fast. Micah's really
Hmm.
fast. They have Dante Fowler Jr., another speed rusher. Like they kind of hit you in waves with their speed. Dexter Lawrence is just he's like kind of like a Brandon Graham type, to where he's very skilled at what he does. It's not necessarily his get off and his speed. He's just skilled. They definitely hit us in waves with it. And they came after the young man. They were
Hmm.
doing their best to isolate him on somebody, and then they would attack him.
Speaking of which, that is one thing that I did give the Cowboys a lot of credit for, is how they've been able to still play very well in spite of injury to key players. They lose Trevon Diggs early. Leighton Vander Esch has been a very big staple at the linebacker position. And, even through those two losses, Linebackers are still playing well. Deron Bland, almost comes out of nowhere, like he's the new Trevon Diggs, and Dallas doesn't miss a beat with those two gone.
Yeah, I think to some extent, I mean, they got lucky because Cooper Kupp, I don't think, is completely back from that injury, to be honest. I also think they have pretty inadequate quarterback play right now because of the injury to what's going on there with Stafford,
Matt
with
Stafford,
the Rams. I think the game circumstance kind of saved them a little bit with Philly. I think if they had to be a little bit more concerned with that run game, I definitely think they would have been in dangerous territory. And they got burnt, to be honest. Like Bland got burnt by Devontae in the end zone. But I mean, Bland fought. I got to give him credit, man. As a cornerback, you're going to win some, you're going to lose some. It's just the way it is. You got to be able to just wipe out that last play and get back in there and compete again, because no matter what, you ain't winning every one. This is not going to happen. Yeah. Especially like so much of what happens at the corner position is so dependent upon the pass rush. I don't care who you have out there. You can have Darrelle Revis in his prime. You give the worst receiver in the league 3 seconds, Revis is getting beat. Simply put. Like, if you give enough time, any receiver in the league is beating the best cornerback. Straightforward. There's just too much time. It's too easy to beat them like that. What makes it special is when they know where to play the leverage, and then they can pair that up with the pass rush. There's certain guys like Darrelle Revis in his prime, Champ Bailey in his prime, that were almost impossible to beat. I mean, it was like you were hoping that you could just attack the other side of the field and win on those matchups. But yeah, I mean, I got to give them credit, man. They develop. That squad has developed, guys. I mean, linebacker spot, they've done a pretty decent job developing dudes. In the secondary, they've done a pretty damn good job of developing guys. I mean, when Curse was a free agent, I even kind of made videos like, I ain't gonna lie to you, Curse would be a really good fit for the Eagles. Like, I wouldn't mind adding him. I know people don't love adding Dallas Cowboy players, but Curse is a little different. I would take him.
Ever since you know who recently.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Speaking of that 2019 season.
Oh man, yeah. that was all over the place. That really was all over the place. So that brings me to the last two critical points, and I'll combine them here because we touched on it a little bit backstage. James Bradberry is really worrying me right now. I think it's the last two games. He just a lot of times, even consistently, he feels like he's not playing to a full speed. Like there's a level of I don't know if there's a level of disinterest there, or if there's something going on. He's getting some of his assignment cues mixed up here. He's paying attention to the run when he should just be solely paying attention to who he's covering. He's getting beat a lot more frequently. I mean,
his hands were caught in the cookie jar. His damn eyes were.
That pass interference call was just blatantly awful. And I hope that knee issue, he was on the sideline for a while. I hope his knee isn't very serious, because we're already very weak at cornerback right now until Bradley Roby returns. And we lost Zach McPherson, a nice depth piece early in the season, even before the regular season or preseason started, for that matter. We're waiting for Bradley Roby to come back. Avonte Maddox is gone. So, I mean, I really don't want to pose the question because we're only 9 weeks in, but we had early concerns at times about Slay. But I think Slay next to Blankenship this game was between Reed and Slay. Those were the two highest graded DBs in terms of coverage. So I wasn't worried about Slay this game, but Bradberry, does he look like he's on some sort of a decline in how he's playing, or is it just a lot of just a lot of I don't know, like shooting himself in the foot with how can I put it, where he's not paying attention to what he should be doing, and versus what he does and what he's supposed to do. I can't put a finger on it.
Yeah, it's a tough one because I'm trying right now, while you were talking, I'm trying to look up his man coverage rate to kind of compare this season to last season. They run very similar schemes, so I don't think that's it. But I'm trying to look to see the percentage of like Greg Newsome the second who plays for Cleveland, but he plays a lot of slots. I think that's kind of cheating a
Yes.
little bit. Eli Ricks has the second most man coverage snaps in the league right now in terms of percentage of his snaps. But I think that's, once again, you're talking about slot guys. When you play the boundary, you're going to play some man in this system. So yeah, here's James Bradberry, 32nd overall, 32.4% of his snaps coming out of man coverage. Unfortunately, though, we have to count for 2 games primarily being in the slots. I don't know that, like, I'm going to compare it to last season, but I don't know it's going to be an accurate comparison because we do have those 2 games we have to count for. Like, he's played a lot more snaps out of the slot than he did, previous in his career. So I don't know how to weigh that per se. Like, I'd almost have to remove those weeks to see where he's at, to be honest.
And wasn't he in a lot more zone situations last year than he was in man? Because I'm trying to think. I thought that zone was more of his strong suit than man was, or it might be the other way around. Because I think James is a lot more of a. I think he's a lot more of a physical corner instead of trying to keep up with somebody in stride. Down the field. He really likes to get in a lot of receivers' faces, slow them down at the point of attack before it's illegal contact, of course. But I think he's a lot more physical than he is more of a runner.
Yes, I'm looking now at 2022. So far, he's not in the top 30. Let me see what he played last year. He's not even in the top 50, it looks like, from 2022 in terms of his man coverage snaps. So definitely it's down a little bit. Let's see how far down it is, because I think that gives it. So look, Darius Slay played 27.5% of his snaps out of man coverage, which is outside of Josiah Scott because he played the slot at 27.7. That's definitely the highest. So it looks like that maybe they're using the roles a little differently. Although I will say, schematically, man, he's not. Did I just misread his name? There's no way he's down this far in man coverage. Hang on, Lindy. There might be a big difference here. Let me make sure.
Oh wow!
I'm about to control F his name just to see if I didn't miss him somehow. Yeah, see, look, he's not on page 3. I missed him somehow. Because like that's my concern is just like, okay, like where are we at here in terms of his usage? Yeah, see, look, he's not even on page 1, so he's on page 2 somewhere. So Bradberry. So yeah, Bradberry played 27% of his snaps last year out of man coverage, and he's up over 30% this year. Which I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're talking about percentages of plays, I mean, a 1% increase is pretty drastic. So when you talk about something that's probably in the realm of 5%, where he's playing 5% more of his snaps out of man coverage, it's hard to weigh because, like I said, we have to weigh it against his slot reps, and I think that plays a role in it. But traditionally speaking, it's harder to play man coverage on the field side because just the pure amount of space you got to play in.
Yeah.
And then also it's easier to run things that way, to run trips, to run bunch formations, to do things to create free releases and to really challenge your secondary that way. So normally because of the amount of space you have to play, even if you're playing a man concept on the field side, you're normally going to be off coverage and man. You're just picking up your man in an off coverage situation. To where on your boundary, even if you're zoning, you're normally going to close the distance a little bit there because you're dealing with a shorter area of the field. Those are normally bigger, stronger, more physical corners. Not always. There's always exceptions to the rule, but those, generally speaking, those are going to be your James Bradberry, your Martin Emersons, those type of corners, Russell Douglas, those type of corners, basically. With that said, like he's just not, they're doing these weird techniques to where they'll bring him up in the situation where you would think it's going to be press, which they just don't do a lot of in the NFL anymore, where you think he's going to get up and he's going to press with his hands. He's going to use a jam technique, but they're up in a press situation, but then it's not bailing out. It's called mirroring. They're mirroring the route pattern of the receiver. And I just don't think that Bradberry has the hips to execute that, to be quite honest. I don't think that's his game. I think if you're going to play Bradberry up like that, I mean, he either needs to be just falling into his zone and just really using that window of space to cause you to have to hold the ball a split second longer. And that's all that is. Or he needs to actually be utilizing a jam technique to disrupt the actual rhythm of the quarterback, to disrupt the timing of the play, because he's not going to stick with receivers that have above average speed past a certain, like Bradberry's got a really good 10 split. When he came out, that's the thing about Bradberry that I see people get wrong. People don't understand how the splits work in football. Bradberry actually ranked in the top 15% of the NFL when he came out of college in terms of his 10 split. So he used to have a little bit more twitch to him. Now he's 30 years old. It's not going to be the same anymore. But his 20 split, that 20 split time has always been a concern. The flying 20, what they call the 20 split. Flying 20 being the back end, and then the 20 split being that area from 10 to 20 yards on that 40-yard split. That's always been to where like you knew like, okay, this is not a speed guy. Like he's going to get caught by certain receivers above a certain percentage. But the thing I always tell people is you tell me the percentage of plays you think they're played above 25 yards. It's not that much. It's not as much as people think.
Yeah.
And that's the tricky part. But yes, I mean, I think his technique is just completely off. I think his technique is bad. I think that I don't know if he's injured. I don't know what's going on. I just don't know if he's just not comfortable with the system and the scheme yet. I'm not sure. It's not drastically different from what we saw, though, from Jonathan Gannon. There are differences, of course, but it's not that different. It's seriously not that different from what we played last year. I mean, I would say that I didn't think that Gannon played as much like cover 6 and like cover 3 and stuff like that, where, Desai will give you a look like it's quarters coverage, but then he'll rotate down into that single high where it'll be like either quarter, half, or it'll be thirds where they're playing, cover 3 or cover 1 or something like that. You know what I mean? Where they're manning up if it's cover 1 on thirds of the field. But you know what I mean? Like they're definitely doing these things. And I didn't see that as much on the tape with, I thought Gannon played a little bit more of just kind of match concepts out of quarters. I thought was Gannon's kind of bread and butter, to where I think Desai will lean a little heavier on giving you a quarters look and then moving that into cover 6, 3, or 1. Sometimes cover 8, just for basic understanding, guys. The only difference between cover 6 and cover 8 is where you play the strength. So basically, if you're playing the half side, so cover 2, you have quarters on one side, you got cover 2 on the other. It's a split field read. So normally your half coverage, your cover 2 side is going to be towards basically where your weak end of the offense is. So you're looking at where you basically got a one receiver kind of route concept there normally. But now if you flip it over and they're playing half towards the strong side of things, to where they've got 2, 3 receivers in stack there, then now you're in a cover 8 concept, because you're playing quarters to the opposite side. But yeah, I mean, it's stuff like that I've noticed is the only difference. I said in the very beginning that I thought that, I made the video on Desai and I told people I thought that the system was very similar, but I thought that he played his corners up a little bit more than what we saw out again. I still told people he still plays passive zones. You're going to get ticked off at times. I saw it all over his film in Chicago. There's definitely passive zones there. I saw it. I told people that you were going to still see it. It's just the way the NFL's run now. It's pretty much everybody does it. And I mean, yeah, it's probably one of the bigger mysteries is why the heck James Bradberry has fallen as hard as he's fallen. He's 30. It's not like he's 32, 33. So, but when you start getting 28, 29, 30, 31, you may not be over the hill in terms of what your athletic ability still is, but maybe you're more susceptible to things like injury and recovery. And that's, that's something that I can't really, I'm not really a sports science guy, so I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I don't deal with professional athletes that are that age. When I was coaching, I'm dealing with teenagers and like young adults, like, anywhere between the ages of about 12 up to about 22. It's normally the age group I've worked with.
Because I'm trying to think how many injuries James has had this year to where they actually kept him off the field. Something tells me it's 2, but the only one I remember was, I think, into week 2 or week 3, he was kept out due to concussion. I think it was week 2 because it happened in the Patriots game. So he hasn't really, I don't think he has had a whole lot to where he's had to miss a considerable amount
Nothing
of time.
reported in terms of like soft tissue yet. And that's the thing is like reporting. So like to explain reporting, because I see this get mistaken a lot, Lindy, to be honest. You don't have to report crap if you don't miss practice. That's just a fact, guys. That's a fact. It doesn't mean the person's healthy. It just means they're able to go through the full practice and you don't have to report it. Simply put.
Yeah.
I mean, there could be something going on there with a soft tissue injury we're just not aware of, or something going on. But I mean, I don't know why they would hide it from Bradberry, but they're openly disclosing like what's going on with like Jordan Davis. I don't know why you're saying you wouldn't use a veteran guy, why you wouldn't give him a little bit of that off practice stuff and just designate the injury. Teams got film. They know if something's not right. You know what I mean? Like, I think I heard someone talking this morning. It might have been the Inside the Birds. We're talking about in 2017, they had film on Aqib Talib, and they knew that something wasn't right. They knew he was definitely like his play was down from previous years. So they set up in the Denver game to go attack him. I mean, they got film. You know what I mean? Like these teams got film. I'm disappointed in Bradberry because a lot of teams talked a lot of crap about Bradberry last year, and I thought Bradberry was really good. last year.
Mm,
And I was hoping that he
no.
would be able to get that revenge tour on them. Now, to be
Yeah,
fair, he hasn't really played those teams yet, but it
they're
starts next
coming
week.
up pretty quick.
Yeah, it starts next week. I mean,
They're
one of those
coming up
guys,
very
he
quick.
doesn't play for that particular team anymore, but I mean, he did send you a quite the salacious, Valentine's Day message. But I mean, I just,
Man,
I don't know, man. I don't know what's going on with him. I really wish I had answers to that, but I mean, it could be some level he's just not comfortable with the scheme. It could be on some level that the Eagles viewed him to be a certain type of athlete still, and it's just not there. He's not that guy anymore. Maybe they're going back and looking at film from 21 when they played him and thinking that he's that guy from 21 season. And he's like, well, we're 2 years removed from that now.
hmm
You know, I'm 2 years older. I'm not about to go line up on someone like Devontae Smith and try to, you know what I mean? And try to shut down that kind of shifty and kind of player. Like, I don't know. I don't know what it is that they're seeing and why they're doing certain things. It could be the instability on the back end. There
hmm
were some games that he had to play back without Reed Blankenship out there, and I think
Yep.
that can have a toll on you. There's things like that kind of come into play. I would love to see them get to gel with having Bradley
Yeah.
Roby, Darius Slay, Byard, Blankenship, and having Bradbury all together, and then just see how it looks for a few games. Because then I think
Yeah.
we'll get a real tell of like, okay, we're either in a lot of trouble or we're doing okay. And that's the thing. Like I don't think any of us can answer really because we don't know until we see the full group together. But I have my concerns that Bradbury is not the same guy anymore.
Yeah. I mean, this is an Eagles secondary that early was rotating guys between Mario Goodrich, Eli Ricks got his chance recently, of course, against the Dolphins, most notably. Um, Josiah Scott, Josh Jobe. We lose,
Sidney,
like we're saying, we lose Zach
Sidney
McPherson.
Brown, yeah, Justin
Sydney,
Evans.
Sydney Brown almost playing out of position. So
Mhm.
it's just a lot of times. A lot of times that's what happens when you lose stability. Bringing Josiah Scott back to try and help things out a little bit, and I haven't really seen a whole lot of him since the Dolphins game, and his name wasn't really called against Miami. So I'm like, well, but they decided to start Ricks and Sydney over him. So something had to have been going on there.
Justin
But
Evans could be a really important addition coming back
yes,
too if he comes
yep,
back. I think people don't
he,
realize like yes, Justin Evans is very injury prone, but he's also really athletic.
yeah,
And he's a little bit more experienced than Sidney Brown is at this point in coverage. And he's played nickel before. He's played
hmm
down as a nickel in New Orleans. As early, like him and Bradley Roby kind of split it last year in New
hmm
Orleans. So I think having a guy like that back, the one that perplexes me, I don't get why they're not using him, is Kendall Vildor. I mean, he's played nickel in the league. He was a 2-year
he,
starter for
he knows the
Desai.
size
He
defense
played
from
for
the
freaking
Bears. Yeah,
Desai. Like, I don't understand why he wasn't thrown in there when we were going through this crazy, cycle. I know they wanted to see Eli Ricks, but it's like, man, Ricks is not a nickel corner. Like, what are we doing? Like, Ricks is an outside corner. I respect the crap out of that young man for saying, look, I'll play wherever the heck you need me to if it gets me on the field. But I mean, come on, man. Once he got to an experienced actual slot receiver, they kind of took advantage of him.
yeah. I mean, maybe it would make a little more sense next year when you're trying to figure out some of your, some of your contractual obligations to these veteran players, and then you can incorporate some of the youth in the middle of them having some experience this year. But it's again, you're trying to get back to the Super Bowl. I mean, there's a lot of experimentation that you can and can't do that could get in the way of the perfect
Yeah.
seating to let you sit in a comfortable spot throughout the playoffs. There's sometimes you can't afford to get rid of that cushion.
I wouldn't be shocked if depend. Like, look, I don't know what they're going to do in terms of like, I can't even tell you the exact extent of the injury that's going on with Justin Evans right now, but I wouldn't be shocked if you don't see them use Sidney Brown a little bit more as a box safety, that kind of that hybrid star / rover type role as a safety.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked if they don't bring Justin Evans back and he doesn't contribute or add into the mix of how they play out of the nickel, because Justin Evans is a little bit more of a coverage guy to be fair about things. Certainly a little bit better at this stage of his career in coverage than like Sidney Brown is. Sidney Brown's a little bit more athletically gifted because of the age and the fact that he's not dealing with, a ton of injuries over the last 3-4 years of his career. But I definitely think Justin Evans could impact it. And I wouldn't be shocked if eventually we don't see Vildor get a call up from the practice squad, because I think you have to have a backup answer to Roby. There needs to be another solution in-house in case Roby, who's over 30 himself, goes down with another injury. You have to have another answer to this. And it's not Eli Ricks. I don't think it's Josiah Scott, or they would have been playing Josiah Scott.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean? To me, I think it's either going to be Justin Evans or Kindle Vildor. I think it's going to be one of those two guys.
I mean, they've already had to bring up Julio Jones and sign him to the active roster for the receiver position because Quez Watkins can't stay on.
I think that's the struggle with Kindle Vildor, is how do you do that with the amount of pure bodies we have in the secondary right now? I think that's why they're probably being a little bit more cautious about when they elevate him, because I was shocked too, because I'm like, dude, this guy's got legitimate experience playing the slot. Why? I mean, why is this guy not playing? Like, what are we doing? Like, we have guys who have never played the slot position really, and they're getting they like, to give Eli Ricks credit, man. I mean, he did a couple of really nice things in the slot. He did, covering it. But we saw that the more he played there and the more film got out on him, they went after him.
Yeah, I mean, our in terms of injury, our insurance policy is kind of compromised right now. So that I mean, that makes perfect sense with them trying to manage when what time is the right time. And, I mean, it just all depends, it all depends on how Kindle looks at practice, how many reps he's getting with the ones, how many is, what the ones or the twos, or, he's stuck on the practice squad right now. So it just all depends at this point.
Running scout team looks probably. And that's the problem, is like, you got a veteran guy that's played. I mean, Vildor's not that old, but he has played in the league a couple of years, played in the system. I don't think that none of these dudes are Avonte Maddox, and that's the brutal truth. But Avante's been injured too much too. That's another conversation probably for the offseason. But I mean, that's a tough one as well. When he's on the field, that's one of my favorite players, is Avonte Maddox, because I know how good he is. However, man, it's season after season with this guy and these injuries. And it's like, even Dallas Goedert, I got to admit, man, it's kind of starting to add up a little bit with Goddard, man. The style of play that he plays lends to injury. It lends itself to injury, unfortunately. And I don't know there's a perfect solution, because you're certainly not going to move away from Dallas Goedert, not while that guy's still in his prime. But at the same time, it's like the Eagles have been scrambling to find a backup plan there.
Yeah.
They've been scrambling to find a backup plan at the nickel, and they've been scrambling to find a backup plan to Dallas Goedert at tight end.
We're not in a spot like where we were a few years ago, where we still have Zach Ertz, and you spend a second on Dallas Goedert, and he he came onto the scene very quickly, but you had nothing to worry about, because you had a backup plan in place that was getting better and better as the years and the weeks went on, and we're going
to find a lot out about Alberto. I think Alberto is going to get utilized. I think he's a guy that's got experience playing in the league. He's still young. He's got experience playing. Probably a little suspect, to be honest, and run blocking. I haven't seen enough of his pass pro to like. He had one pretty good route, actually. It was the 3rd and 3 play, to where he released and absolutely almost depleted one of the secondary players coming in on a blitz, which I thought was a really smart pickup from him. And then he cut across the middle on like a little over route kind of concept, and he was open. I mean,
that's who I seen that I thought was open. Yes. I think it was him and Zacchaeus that were open that Hurts could have went to, but I think he had it in his mind that this is going to AJ, no ifs, ands, or buts.
I think that play was designed specifically for AJ, and I think the coaches need to go back and say, hey, man, if we get a look similar to this again, we do need to have it in our minds like, hey, Jalen, if you see that he's not even with the corner, maybe come off and look at the second or third option here, because, this really did defeat the coverage. Yeah, and if we get another man coverage concept like this, man, we got to, and it's tough because AJ is just beating everybody. But I mean, he did. I mean, it was good. It was good coverage there by Bland, to be honest. Like,
I think there was too much.
He smothered it. Yeah,
I think there was too much defense in the coach's defending that play call. I think there was too much of it. You guys knew
You could tell
deep down that
it
that
was a
wasn't the
sticky topic
best.
for him. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
it was a sticky topic for him because when you get that defensive about it, you clearly know yourself that like,
Yeah.
okay, like you know, and I understood Nick's explanation for it. I mean, I think it's perfectly reasonable explanation, but it's like, hey man, but game circumstance matters too. You're third and
Yes.
3. You're trying to run clock here. This game is over if you can just convert 2 first downs, basically.
Go for the
You got
6.
2
Yep.
shots from 3 yards, basically, man.
Yep.
If you can get positive yards, now mind you, if they stuff you or you go backwards on third, then yeah, you're punting, but at least the clock's still running.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's like, dude, if you got at least 1 yard, now you're in a 4th and 2, even though you're on your side of the 50. I'm just saying, I'm probably going for it with this offense and what I know it can do. Like it's, yeah, I understood what they were trying to do. I understood why the play got called up. You know, I know there's like I said, Lindsay, there's complexity around, was this a Brian Johnson call? Was this a Nick Sirianni instruction because of the coverage? Or was this Jalen Hurts making an audible because he saw the coverage? I don't know the answer to that. I don't have that answer, but I look at it this way. It doesn't matter. It was the wrong time for the play.
Yeah.
It was the wrong time for the play. Now, if you had converted that play on the ground and you get back up there and you were going to run the ball again on first down and you look out there and they're back in that same coverage again because you went hurry up and they go right back to that same coverage, by all means, take your shot. Then even though you're probably going to stop the clock if you don't convert, I could understand. I could defend that more. Like, nah, man, at some point you got to back them off of you a little bit. You got to get them out of the box. Like, I get it. I just thought it was the wrong time to try to get them out of the box.
Yeah.
And look, it's one of those things, man. If they convert on that play, nothing's getting said. You know what I mean?
Yep,
Nobody's saying crap if they convert. But
yeah,
you didn't convert, and now it's honestly, it's always going to get called into question.
yeah.
Like,
and
it's one of those things
I
where
don't.
you better
I
be
don't.
right.
Yeah. I don't remember if Dallas had any of their timeouts left at that point either. I think they. I think after the. I think after the incompletion, they exhausted their last timeout. So you were stuck in a situation where Dallas had all 3 of its timeouts, and you have absolutely no choice. But you need to get a couple of first downs to really have the ability to chew the clock. Dallas does not get another possession, and you can close this game out like we talked earlier. The Eagles have had a very difficult time in really closing the door on teams, but they've had this same problem since last year. But last year was a little bit different in where they're just piling a bunch of points in the first half. They go very stagnant towards the halfway point of the third quarter into the end of the third quarter.
One of the things I'm going to show too, Lindy, on the video I'm going to do today is they started off, I think it was the first down play where they take Julio Jones and they reduce him. So they bring him back down towards the line of scrimmage and they're using him as a blocker. And then they pull. I think it was Lane and it was Steen that pulled. When I first saw it, I was about to get on Steen, but then I realized, like, no, I've had Jalen Williams, who's a former collegiate offensive lineman, explain this concept to me before. When you're the first man through in a pull, you're going to basically the first man of threat, which it sucked because like Julio was already there, but that's the guy closest to the end man of line of scrimmage. The issue is that the linebacker or the safety beat Lane Johnson to the hole. And that just caused this big, I don't know that they had a lot of confidence in running the ball, but I mean, come on, man. It was 3 yards and 2 downs. 3 yards and 2 downs, Nick. Come on, man. 2 downs, 3 yards. Come on. We could have got that. We could have got that, man.
How many carries did Rashad Penny get that game? 2?
2, I think.
For 8 yards?
Yeah.
And he didn't see the ball again? Come on.
I think I even put up a poll on Twitter. I put up a poll on Twitter talking about like how many red zone plays did everyone think that Kenneth Gainwell was going to get? How many total? I think I did total yards for DeAndre Swift, and I think I did total carries for Rashad Penny. And shout out to the guys who put 3 or less because you won.
Jeez,
you were right.
Yeah,
3 or less.
I mean, I think Swift is getting the proper amount of carries, but it's the way they devise the game plan in a lack of utilization between everybody else. Either that or it's just a lot of situational misses to where you had a good opportunity to run at this point in time, this down and distance. And there's a lot of times where they're choosing to pass instead because they understand, well,
Yeah.
they have the matchup in terms of the pass game because they have 3 awesome pass catchers. But it's like you have to, I think you have to do a little better of a job and not limiting yourself and being one dimensional because the Jets took complete advantage of that. And that's why you lost that game. So
Well, there's a reason why I would never have a media pass because I would immediately get it suspended. Because when Nick would have given that justification he gave me, I would have looked right at Nick and I would have said, "What is Jalen Hurts is saying? Keep the main thing the main thing. 3 yards, Nick. 2 plays, 3 yards. Keep the main thing, bro. If you get a first down there, you're really putting Dallas in a difficult situation to get the ball back." Like, it is rough, man. That is a tough one because like. I understood philosophically why he did what he did, but it's like, dude, not there and not in that moment. Pick your spots.
Yeah.
And it's hard to defend it. Like, it's like, I get it, man. People make mistakes. I'm not trying to, like, Nick's won a lot of games. You know what I mean? Like, Nick, this combination of Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni and this coaching staff and in this position group and players around them, they've won a ton of games. So, like, I'm trying to keep that in mind, right? Like, the bottom result is these dudes win. But
they do.
I just feel like we're right on the cusp of just absolutely putting teams away and this not even being discussion with the rest of the NFL. But you can't do that with Patrick Mahomes. You better not give Pat the ball an extra time. Because that's how I felt like we did, is we ended up giving Dak Prescott an extra possession, is what I felt like we did. You better not give Patrick Mahomes an extra possession. We learned that lesson in the Super Bowl. Do not give him an extra possession.
Yeah, I mean that's what I was saying to myself, and I think I still stand behind this tweet, and I says after the game, I go, if Philly plays like they did, especially in that last sequence in Dallas, if they play like they did, they're close to getting blown out. Because I mean, you're in enemy territory at that point, and
on the road,
we all know how
much
more difficult it is to play in Dallas because of how rowdy their fans are versus ours, and you don't have that home field advantage anymore. And just one mistake, the Cowboys are going to eat you alive on it. In terms of a turnover, they're going to. That's how they're built. So you can't. Between San Francisco, Seattle potentially, Buffalo, I don't know because Josh Allen has been just thrown way too many interceptions. I mean, there's just a lot of teams left in the schedule that can really make you pay
they told us
for
that
these kind of miscues.
Jalen Hurts isn't Josh Allen. Thank God.
Oh man,
thank God, because that dude throws a lot of critical crunch time interceptions.
Yeah, he does.
That's the thing too, is like this game coming up is important. This is a big freaking game. It is in Kansas City, which is one of the hardest and loudest places to play. It is a tough task against Pat Mahomes and Andy Reid. Tough task. I don't care who the position, I don't care what that position group looks like at receiver. That's still Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes. That's going to be tough.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, you got Andy Reid off a freaking bye on Monday night. That game's got all the makings of like a real that like it's probably the best game of the year. And we're coming off of probably what was the best game of the year.
Yeah.
Between Dallas and Philly. That I think was probably the best game of the year so far. And now we're probably going into another situation where this is definitely like they knew what they were doing when they made the schedule. On the road in Kansas City, Monday night, both teams coming off a bye with Andy Reid versus Nick.
Yep.
Super Bowl rematch. Yeah.
And the difference being, I think Taylor Swift is on tour right now, but I hope she's not there. I hope she's not there with all that crap going on. So maybe Travis Kelce will be off again like he was the last time when she wasn't there. We'll hope for that. But
I'll say this: if they win that game on the road versus Andy coming off a bye and Pat Mahomes,
oh my goodness,
I'm in on this team. No one's beating this team. It's over. It's over at that point, in my opinion. Like the only team I think that could really stick with us are two. I think Baltimore is just tough to defend. And I think
Oh my
Cincinnati
goodness.
can match you offensively from a skill standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But their offensive line is complete and utter crap. With that said, they can match you from skill position standpoint. Like
And
those are the two teams I look at from the AFC that were like, if you beat Kansas City, man, you were in a really good spot.
mm-hmm.
If you win that game in that pivotal moment, I feel really good about this team because they are tough. That means that that team is mentally tough as it gets. That's going to be a
But
weird thing too. Like, because Brandon Graham's going to be there. Andy Reid drafted him. It's been so many years.
yeah,
That's going to be an interesting one.
that's good. That's gonna be wild. That's gonna be wild. But I think on a lighter note here, I have a couple of fun slides left to look at here to close the show out. And as we were just talking about, no better time for a bye. The injury bug has not left this team alone. Even before their first game, even before the preseason to begin with, they lose guys like Sean Bradley, who was a massive staple in terms of special teams. What he's been able to do, he was kind of like he was kind of a captain figure for them. His contributions to special teams in that group. Zach McPherson was one of those guys as well. So that's another piece of depth that we don't have in the secondary. Losing Avonte Maddox in week 2. To me, Jalen Hurts has not played 100% for at least the last 4 weeks, in my opinion. And then again, we were talking about the rest of the schedule. You get a well-deserved rest before, the Chiefs at Arrowhead. Our next Kelly Green game at home against the Bills. You got the 49ers. You got to go to Dallas. And then you have the Seahawks, who are still in the mix of things. I believe they have been more up than they have been down. But with their star rookie corner over there and tearing things up, and how well their defense has been playing in some games, they're going to be a tough task, because I don't think we have seen Seattle since I think 2019 or 2020. I don't remember which year it was. But of course, we got players to look forward to coming back off of IR and just like a couple of weeks or so. So, Cam Jurgens, the practice window was open for him already. He and Justin Evans were eligible to return for week 11. Quez Watkins, I believe, as well. And then Bradley Roby should be coming back after nursing that shoulder injury, which I'm not sure if it's a stinger or not. I thought I heard that it was kind of a stinger type of injury. It may not be as severe as what Jordan Howard's was. His was a grade 2. I think Bradley's was more along the lines of a grade 1 shoulder stinger, so it shouldn't bother him as much as it did Jordan Howard. But of course, it's two different positions. So,
Sure.
man, no better time for rest when it comes to the bye. And then Jalen Hurts, Jalen Hurts on Sunday really got me. I think he got everybody, all the hearts of Philadelphia fans. At that post game interview where he says, "For this team and for this city, I'll do anything." It's just, I mean, it really takes me back into thinking, like, what did we do to deserve this kid, and how well he's been playing, the character that he has, the mentality that he possesses in playing the game of football, being the overall leader and captain of this offense, and how he takes command, and how he's out there play after play. He's going through this pain in his knee and everything else, and he's controlling it the best he can. But it's almost a blessing and a curse at times, because it's he wants to win so bad, and it's almost where I feel it's almost at the expense of his health when we need him for more important games, but he just wants to win. So I liked seeing this by Ruben Frank on Twitter, and comparing Patrick Mahomes and Hurts's numbers since last year in 2022, and it may be hard to see on screen, but how darn close he is in terms of these statistics here against who people still think is the best quarterback in all of football. And since last year, Jalen Hurts is playing just as good as him. Their records are about the same, 22-2 to 21-5, everything across the board. I mean, it's unbelievable with what Hurts has been able to accomplish, Patrick Mahomes, I think, is getting closer to pushing 30, and Jalen is only in his mid-20s. He's not even in his technical prime yet. He's still building as a quarterback, and it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's got the athleticism and the, some of the same moxie and some of the things we've seen from previous guys, in years past, the Dante Culpeppers, the Steve McNairs, the Donovan McNabbs, all those guys, Steve Young, those type of guys that could play a little bit of the dual threat. But he also has that mentality of a Tom Brady.
Mm-hmm.
He's got that mentality, and it's very obvious. Like, you could see that football is pretty much his, hobby, his interest, his career, his profession. Like, it's a little bit of everything to him.
Yeah. I think this, I also think the same should be said for the head coach too, because all these players need a leader figure at the top of that totem pole. And you look at these here, Brandon Deeg tweeting this one on the left-hand side. All the head coaches hired in 2021, Sirianni has the best record out of all of them. 2 of them got fired already. And but the biggest talking point with Sirianni was his opening press conference and how bad of a judgment he got based off of that. What he's been able to do the last 2 years. And then, Brandon Lee Gowton on the right-hand side, Sirianni is the 11th head coach since the merger in 70 to lead a team to 8-1 or better in back-to-back seasons at the start of the year. And you look at the list of coaches on that. You look at the rest of the coaches on that list.
Right, George Seifert,
Tony Dungy,
John Madden, yeah, Don Shula, Tony Dungy, yeah, Mike Shanahan.
So the level of credit here not only goes to how well the quarterback has been in his development, but you got to have the right coach behind you to carry to not just carry the most important positions on the football team, but just everybody else as a whole. I'm still flabbergasted to this day. I mean, we watched this team and how, in the implosion of 2020, and we're in 2023 now. This team just coming off of a trip to the Super Bowl, unfortunately not winning it, but they're in contention for a second year in a row at 8-1 yet again, much like the 2017 to 2018 transition. But I think this pairing of years is a lot more efficient than it was than the years that we did win the Super Bowl and almost got back to the NFC Championship game. It's the turnaround is just unbelievable. It still blows my mind to this day.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a pretty historic run that Nick's on right now, and it's everything. I mean, it's the health and it's the wellness of the entire organization, from the owner just knowing how to select these guys to Howie Roseman being able to operate the front office at pretty much a pretty historic rate right now, to be honest. I mean, he's pretty much one of the real key factors of what we're doing here, to Nick Sirianni being that guy that can motivate players, to Jalen Hurts being everything that they invested in and being worth every dime. Like, all the key acquisitions and moves they made, like AJ Brown, trading up to go get Devontae Smith, going from 6 to 12 to 10, the pinging and dinging around, but ending up with Devontae Smith. I mean, all of it. It's all of it together, right? I mean, it's so hard because there's so many negatives that built into that situation, like Jalen Reagor and some of the things that went on. But it's also surrounded by this air of, like, at the end of the day, it didn't matter because now we've built a Super Bowl contending roster a year prior, and we look like we have another Super Bowl contending roster in this current year. So, I mean, that's 3 in like 6-7 years. I mean, the guy knows what he's doing. I mean, you got to give Howie credit.
You even deepen the context and how they were able to even go like almost 2 steps high. They went 2 steps higher instead of 1 step higher. You skip a step. It's wild.
Even bringing in local kids to play on free agency deals. Hassan Riddick.
That's very underrated.
Isaiah White.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like Kaiser White last year was a local product. Like, this year, Kevin Byard,
Evan Byer, yep,
you know what I mean? Like
crazy.
they're smart about the way they do things. And then
Hmm.
there's some guys that are coming in and just, you get guys like, have a veteran guy like Chris Long that played here only for a couple of seasons. All he talks about is Philly.
Yep.
The guy was a Ram for how many years? He won Super Bowls with New
Ram,
England. Well,
Patriot. Yep.
yeah, like come on. And all he talks about is Philly, really. I mean,
It's a Philly thing.
yeah,
That's what it is. It's a Philly
yeah,
thing. Keeping the Georgia boys together.
yeah.
DeAndre Swift, a former Georgia boy, but St. Joe's Prep, Philly guy right there. It's great. Yeah, unbelievable. But I'll tell you what, I think I kept you long enough, Steve. This, we lasted almost an hour and a half, but I mean, I think that's one of the best parts in having you on is that the uh, the context and detail of discussion that that you bring and I'm able to bounce off of it. Just it makes for it just makes for a lot of good conversation, and it's very easy to get carried away with because you want to learn more, you want to dig, you want to dig deeper beneath the surface instead of taking everything at face value. So this was an awesome episode for me, and I really appreciate your time coming on, man. This was great.
Oh yeah, man. I appreciate you for having me on here. And like, I mean, just to kind of end that conversation we were just having, I mean, if people really want to understand like the importance of what's going on here with, Jeffrey Lurie, Howie Roseman, Nick Sirianni, and Jalen Hurts, just go back and study that 80s 49ers squad with George Seifert and Joe Montana, their ownership, their GM, what they were able to do and build around it. Mike Shanahan and all these dudes that came out from underneath that umbrella. Without George Seifert, you know what I mean? Like that doesn't happen. Andy Reid was a product. He's not directly tied to George Seifert, but indirectly he is because he comes out of the Green Bay staff, which had direct connections back to George Seifert and that 49ers and that West Coast offense.
Absolutely.
And, I don't know what it's going to ultimately be here in Philly between this group, but I do think something's going to come out of it. Like, I think it's going to have that kind of impact on football.
It's looking like it. And I think it also means to discredit what other teams are doing this year. Baltimore Ravens having a really nice bounce back. Some looks like something's building pretty well in Detroit without the Lions have been playing as well. I don't think a lot of people have seen that coming necessarily, but they have a nice draft. One of my guys, Brian Branch, goes over there, and I wanted him for this team, but that's not the here nor there because we can arguably say we're better off in getting Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith in the first round. So, but yeah, man, it's just crazy, absolutely crazy. But I think, like I said, man, this was phenomenal, and
Yeah.
I appreciate everybody else. Aside from Steve's time, I appreciate everybody else tuning in to a little more of an extended episode of Linc'd in the End Zone. This was episode 2, and of course, Steven Heitter for Gate City Sports Talk. And be sure to check out his channel as well and what he has been contributing to Philadelphia Eagles content and some fantastic breakdowns over there and the detail that he brings to y'all. It's almost second to none in this group of content creators. So like I said, I really appreciate your time, and that'll do it for episode 2 of Linc'd in the End Zone. Yours truly, Lindy Endzone, off of the LinkedIn podcast. Brought to you by Sideline Sports Network. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and I will see you guys next time for episode 3. Have a good day, y'all.